I was 19 years old when I learned how easily a man's beliefs can shatter. 19, barely old enough to shave without cutting myself, yet old enough to be taught how to die with honor, old enough to charge into enemy fire, old enough to carry the weight of an empire on my thin shoulders, old enough to believe every word drilled into my skull. And the words were always the same: better to die than to be captured. Americans show no mercy. A Japanese soldier who falls into enemy hands is already dead. I believed these truths with the devotion of a child reciting prayers. That's why, when the bullet tore through my shoulder on that humid afternoon in the Pacific, and I collapsed behind a mangled tree stump, I didn't cry out for help. I didn't try to crawl away. I didn't even try to dress the wound. I simply clutched the dirt, pressed my forehead against the ground, and whispered to myself, "This is where I die." The battlefield around me pulsed with chaos, screams in Japanese, shouts in English, the heavy thump of boots, the stinging crack of rifles. Smoke curled low, thick and oily, burning the inside of my nose. My arm throbbed with a deep, hot pain that made me nauseous. Blood soaked through my uniform, warm at first, then disturbingly cold. I felt myself drifting in and out of consciousness. Every time I opened my eyes, the world swam. Every time I closed them, I wondered if they would ever open again. I don't know how long I lay there. Minutes, hours. Time in battle loses meaning, but eventually, the gunfire softened, the shouting faded, the earth stopped trembling beneath me. All I heard was wind, and footsteps, American footsteps, heavy, confident, growing closer. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I had imagined this moment so many times, always the same ending. A boot pressing down on my back, a cold barrel against my skull, a shot, quick, clean, efficient. That was how Americans dealt with wounded Japanese soldiers. At least, that's what we had been told. So I closed my eyes and prepared myself. I waited for the medal, waited for the command, waited for death. Instead, someone knelt beside me. I felt fingers gloved, strong slide under my neck and gently lift my head. My body tensed in terror. My eyes fluttered open. Above me hovered the face of an American medic. His helmet was dented. Sweat streaked through the dirt on his cheeks. His glasses were fogged at the edges. He looked tired, bone-tired, but not angry, not cruel, not victorious, just concerned. His brows pulled together as he examined the bullet wound. Then he said something words too fast for me to understand. His tone was urgent, not hateful. He pressed 2 fingers to my neck, searching for a pulse. He found one, and he sighed in relief. Why? Why would he care if the pulse of an enemy soldier was fading? He shouted over his shoulder, "We got another one! Still breathing!" Another medic sprinted over. They spoke quickly, efficiently, like men who had done this 1,000 times. Before I could react, the first medic tightened a cloth around my arm to slow the bleeding. Pain shot down my ribs, sharp and electric. I gasped. He noticed. "It's okay," he said, voice calming. "You're all right. We've got you." I did not understand the words then, but I understood the voice. It was the voice of someone trying to save me. For the first time since childhood, I felt tears burn behind my eyes. Why? Why would an American save a Japanese soldier? Why waste medicine on an enemy? Why stain his hands with my blood in an attempt to keep me alive? I whispered a single trembling phrase in my own language. "Naz? Why?" He didn't understand, but he smiled softly, almost sadly, and said, "You'll be okay. Stay with me." I don't remember the journey to the medical tent. The world tilted and blurred as they lifted me onto a stretcher. Branches scraped across my boots. The sun flickered through leaves above like a broken lantern light. But I do remember the hands. Hands gripping the stretcher firmly. Hands keeping me from falling. Hands that belonged to the people I had been taught to hate. I remember the smell of the medic's gloves. Rubber, blood, and antiseptic. I remember the rhythmic thump-thump of his boots as he walked beside me. I remember him glancing down sometimes to make sure I was still conscious. I remember thinking, this man is trying harder to save my life than my commanders ever tried to protect it. When they reached the American field station, they lowered me onto a table. Bright lights stabbed into my eyes. Shadows moved quickly around me. Metal instruments clinked. Someone pressed something warm against my arm. The medic, the first one, leaned close and held my gaze. "You're safe now," he said. "We're going to take care of you. Safe. Safe." I had never felt less safe, and yet a strange peace spread through me, like warmth pooling under ice. Something deep inside me whispered, maybe everything you believed was wrong. And that was the moment my war began to change. Not the war fought with bullets, but the war inside me. The war between indoctrination and truth, between hatred and kindness, between what I had been taught and what I was seeing with my own eyes. The war that would shape the rest of my life. There is a unique kind of silence that exists only in war. Not the silence of peace, not the silence of rest. It is the silence between the moment you realize you are alive and the moment you wonder if you deserve to be. That silence filled the American medical tent as I lay on the steel table, staring at the canvas ceiling that fluttered with every gust of wind. I could still hear the medic's voice echoing inside my skull. "You're safe now. Safe." I had never hated a word more, because safe meant something was wrong with everything I believed. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not blood, not mud, not gunpowder, but antiseptic, sharp and clean, like a strange kind of peace. The air felt cool on my skin. The canvas above was stained from rain, sweat, and smoke. A lantern swung gently, casting long shadows of doctors moving like ghosts around me. My breathing was shallow. Each inhale tasted like metal. My lips trembled uncontrollably. A nurse approached American. Young, freckled, hair tied tightly under her cap. She lowered her face close to mine. Studying my condition, her eyes were a soft gray blue, like winter sky before snowfall. She said something I couldn't understand. Her voice had no contempt, no disgust, no fear, just human warmth. She adjusted the blanket around me, tucking it under my shoulder to keep me warm. And then, God help me, she smiled. My heart twisted painfully. I didn't know what to do with kindness from the enemy. I still don't. Lying there, I remembered every lesson, every warning, every whisper told to us since childhood. Americans are savages. American doctors will let you bleed. American nurses will spit on your wounds. Capture is shame worse than death. A wounded soldier must die, not live in the hands of the enemy. Honor above life, death above capture. Your body, your spirit, your loyalty, all belonged to the emperor. But here I saw something else. A man placing a bandage on my arm with gentle hands. A nurse adjusting the light to keep it out of my eyes. Another doctor checking my pulse with genuine concern, not because I was Japanese, not because I was a prisoner, but because I was a man who needed help. Each act of compassion stabbed me in ways the bullet never could. When Dr. Harris entered the tent, everything changed. The other medics moved aside, creating space for him. His presence carried calm, the type of calm earned by stitching dozens of men back to life in a single day. He looked older, up close. Lines around his eyes, hair graying at the temples. Not stern, not cold, just tired. He examined the wound on my shoulder, his brow furrowing. He didn't speak to me directly at first, just to the staff around him. Bullet lodged near the scapula. Heavy infection setting in. If we don't operate, hell lose the arm. Lose the arm. I felt my stomach drop. Suddenly, every nightmare from Japanese training returned. Wounded men being abandoned. Officers ordering mercy killings on their own soldiers. The belief that mutilation was worse than death. I tried to speak, to object, to tell him to leave it. Let it rot. Let me die. But the words wouldn't come. Only a hoarse whisper escaped. Yamete. Onegai. Stop. Please. Dr. Harris finally looked me directly in the eye. Those eyes, the eyes of the man who held my life between his fingers, did not look like the eyes of an enemy. He said something softly, slowly, as if trying to make sure I felt not understood the meaning. You're going to be all right. I shook my head weakly. No, enemy, no help. Japanese, broken English, mixed with fear. But Harris only placed a steady hand on my good shoulder and replied, "A wounded man is not an enemy. Not in my tent." The words hit harder than any bullet. My vision blurred, not from pain, from the realization that my world, my beliefs were cracking like thin ice under heavy boots. The tent grew brighter as lamps were brought closer. Metal trays rattled with instruments, scalpels, clamps, scissors. Nurses tied masks around their faces. A medic squeezed a bag connected to a tube in my arm. My head grew foggy. I tried to fight the drowsiness. I was terrified. What if they used the operation to torture me? What if they cut away more than they said? What if they made an example of me? What if I woke up without limbs? My heart pounded, panic rising. The nurse noticed. She placed a cool hand on my cheek. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'll stay here." She didn't know I understood nothing of her words. But tone is its own language. For the first time since being shot, I stopped shaking. The room dimmed around the edges. Voices became distant. The pain in my shoulder faded into a dull hum. Just before I drifted into unconsciousness, I heard Dr. Harris say one final sentence. "Let's save this young man's arm." Save. Save. Such a simple word. Such a miraculous betrayal of everything Imperial Japan had taught me. I surrendered to the darkness, not to death, but to the hands of men I had once believed were monsters. As the anesthesia pulled me under, my mind drifted to my mother. I saw her kneeling in the garden behind our home, hands deep in the soil, planting winter vegetables. I smelled the familiar aroma of wet earth and sweet miso soup drifting from our kitchen. I heard her voice calling my name. "Sato! Sato!" I reached toward her. My arms felt light, whole, untouched. And then, from somewhere far away, another voice, a real voice, cut through the dream. Heart rate steady, infection contained. Keep going, American voices. Voices fighting to keep me alive. And with that final contradiction, I fell completely into blackness. When I finally opened my eyes, the war was gone. Not ended, gone. Replaced by something quieter. Something painfully gentle. A ceiling of pale canvas stretched above me, swaying with the breeze. The lamps hung low, their warm light soft on my face. Somewhere nearby, someone was humming an American Nurse, her voice steady, calm, impossibly peaceful. I blinked slowly. My throat felt dry, my shoulder ached, but not with the violent, searing pain of the battlefield. This pain was tighter, cleaner stitched pain. I was alive, and more shockingly, I still had my arm. I tried to lift it. A sharp sting shot through me, causing me to gasp. A figure appeared instantly at my side, the young nurse with freckled cheeks, the same one who had smiled at me before the surgery. She placed a gentle hand on my forearm. "Easy," she murmured. "You just came out of surgery." I didn't understand the words, but the meaning washed over me like warm water. Her voice wasn't the voice of an enemy. It was the voice of someone worried. She checked my bandages with delicate fingers. Each movement was soft, soft in a way I hadn't felt since childhood. My mother used to patch up my scraped knees like this, whispering that everything would be all right. Now an American woman, an enemy woman, held my arm with the same tenderness. It made something inside me twist painfully. Because mercy from an enemy is harder to bear than cruelty. Cruelty you expect. Mercy you are not prepared for. She poured water into a metal cup and helped me sip. When I choked slightly, she steadied my shoulder, not the injured one, the good one, and waited patiently until I managed to swallow. She said something and smiled again. And though I couldn't understand the words, I understood the kindness. I looked at her, unable to hold back the question that clawed up my throat. Nays? Why? Why help me? She didn't understand, but she answered anyway with a soft pat on my arm and a simple expression that all humans recognize. Because you need help. Because you're wounded. Because you're alive. And in that moment, I felt the first crack in the armor Japan had built around my heart. Later that afternoon, Dr. Harris entered, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his sleeve. His uniform was stained with blood, not mine. Not all mine, at least, and exhaustion hung from his shoulders like a heavy coat. But when he saw me awake, he straightened. "Good," he said. "You made it." I didn't understand the words, but I felt the relief in them. He approached my bed, lifted the edge of my bandage, inspected the wound. His voice dropped to a gentle hum as he worked, like he was talking to a child, or to someone who needed comfort more than explanations. Every movement was careful, controlled. deeply human. I watched him with wide eyes. This man had cut into my flesh, fished out a bullet, cleaned the infection that would have killed me, stitched me back together, and now stood before me acting as if saving my life was the most natural thing in the world. When he finished checking the dressings, he placed a hand over my good shoulder again. A simple touch, a steadying one. At that moment, a shameful thought entered my mind. My commanders had never touched me like that. My officers had never spoken to me with that tone. My leaders had never cared if I lived. But this enemy doctor did. I wasn't alone. Across from me lay another Japanese soldier, Kondo, pale and thin, a bandage wrapped around his abdomen. He opened his eyes when he sensed me looking and whispered hoarsely, "Are we alive?" I nodded weakly. He stared at the ceiling, his lips trembling. "I dreamed of home," he whispered. Then I woke up and thought, this must be hell. I understood, because I had thought the same. In another cot, an American soldier groaned in pain, clutching his leg. The nurse who tended him earlier now hurried to his side, adjusting his splint, whispering assurances. Her kindness was the same, no more, no less, than the kindness she'd shown me. This equality confused me more deeply than anything else. Japan had raised us to believe in hierarchy between officers and soldiers, between men and women, between Japanese and non-Japanese. But here I saw no hierarchy. A wounded man was simply a wounded man. And it was infuriating. It was humbling. It was beautiful. Late that evening, a young American soldier entered carrying a tray of tin cups. Steam rose from them. The rich scent of something warm filled the air. Tea. Not Japanese tea. Stronger. Bitter. Strange. He handed the first cup to the American soldier, then moved toward us. Kondo turned away, refusing. The soldier hesitated, then tried again. Kondo snarled in Japanese, "We do not take favors from the enemy." The words were sharp enough to cut flesh. But the soldier didn't react with anger. He simply set the cup down beside Kondo's bed, bowed his head slightly, and walked away. A small bow, a gesture of respect, from an American soldier. Kondo stared at the cup for a long moment, jaw trembling. 10 minutes later, he drank it. And when I caught his eye, he looked away quickly, ashamed. But the warmth spreading through his thin hands told the real story. That night, Dr. Harris returned for one last check. The lamps were dimmed, and the tent glowed amber. The sounds of the jungle crickets, distant waves, rustling leaves mixed with the soft groans of wounded men. He leaned over my bed. "You're strong," he said. "You'll recover." Again, I didn't understand the words, but I understood the intention. And then he did something I will never forget. He lifted the corner of the blanket and tucked it gently around my injured shoulder, making sure I was warm. Not because I was Japanese, not because I was a soldier, because I was someone's son. My throat tightened. Hot tears welled in my eyes. I turned my head so he wouldn't see, but he did. He rested a hand on the bed frame and said quietly, "You're going to live. Live." A word Japan had never promised us. A word America gave freely. He turned to leave. Just before exiting the tent, he paused, looked back at me, and nodded. A doctor's nod. A man's nod. A gesture I would replay for the rest of my life. That was the night I realized something frightening and miraculous. Mercy existed. It had always existed. I had simply been raised in a world that tried to deny it. I did not sleep well that first night after the surgery. Not because of the pain, though the pain was real, pulsing through my shoulder like a drumbeat. Not because of fear, though fear still curled in my stomach like a coiled snake. I couldn't sleep because every time I closed my eyes, I saw American hands saving me. Hands with dirt under the nails. Hands stained with other men's blood. Hands that had pulled a bullet from my flesh and stitched me like I was something worth repairing. In my dreams, Dr. Harris spoke Japanese. In my dreams, the nurse called me by my childhood name, and every time I jolted awake, I found myself staring into the dim glow of the lanterns, trying to understand how everything I believed could be so wrong. Just before dawn, the tent was filled with the quiet sounds of recovery. Soft groans, cloth shifting, a spoon clinking inside a metal cup. The air was cool, but not cold. Someone had lowered the canvas walls slightly during the night to keep the wind out. I realized then that I had not been left alone. Someone had been coming in and out to check on us. Someone had kept the lamps burning low. Someone had made sure we were warm enough. Someone who did not have to. I turned my head carefully and saw the young nurse from the day before. She was making her rounds, checking temperatures, adjusting dressings, whispering soft encouragement to men who didn't understand a single word. Then she reached my bed. "Good morning," she murmured, her voice soft but bright, like sunlight peeking through heavy clouds. I didn't speak, couldn't speak. She poured a bit of warm broth into a cup and held it near my lips. I hesitated. In our training, we were told the Americans might poison prisoners, that they might use food as a weapon, a way to humiliate or weaken us. She saw my hesitation and didn't push. She simply smiled, gentle, patient, and blew lightly on the surface of the broth to cool it. A small gesture, a motherly gesture. My throat tightened. I opened my mouth. The broth was simple salt, chicken, warmth, but it slid down like life itself. My stomach twisted in both relief and shame. Shame because this kindness came from an enemy. Relief because my body had forgotten what warm food felt like. She fed me slowly, a spoonful at a time, waiting for me to swallow before giving another. I felt like a child, but I also felt seen, cared for, human. That morning was when the internal struggle began. My body wanted to heal. My mind wanted to survive, but my pride wanted to die. Every lesson from my officers echoed inside me. Capture is shame. Mercy from the enemy is deception. Better to die than owe your life to an American. I turned my face away, ashamed of my own hunger. But the nurse misunderstood. She thought I was in pain. She glanced around, found an extra blanket, and placed it gently across my legs. The warmth spread through me. The guilt spread faster. I whispered under my breath, "Yamity, please, stop being kind." She didn't understand. Thank God she didn't. Later that morning, Dr. Harris entered the tent holding a clipboard. He looked more rested than the night before, but only slightly. War steals sleep from everyone. He approached my bed, checked my temperature, lifted the bandage, studied the stitches, and nodded. "Good healing," he said slowly, deliberately, trying to make the words clear even if I didn't understand the language. I understood anyway. Then he motioned to a medic to bring something over, a small bottle of medicine. He pointed to it, then to me, then placed it beside my bed. Antibiotics. Real medicine. Medicine I knew Japanese soldiers would never waste on prisoners of war. I stared at the bottle, my mind spinning with confusion. Why? Why save me? Why try so hard? Why give valuable supplies to an enemy soldier? Why not let infection take its course, quick, easy, efficient? When I finally forced myself to speak, my voice cracked. America? Why help? Japanese? It wasn't a real sentence, but it was enough. Dr. Harris paused. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he knelt down beside my bed, so we were at eye level. His voice was steady, simple, devastating. Because pain is pain. Because life is life. Because you are a man. A man. Not Jap. Not slant. Not enemy. A man. Those 3 words ripped something open inside me. Something I had held tight for years. He patted my uninjured shoulder. "You heal," he said. "That's your job now. Your job now. Not fighting, not dying, not serving an empire that had abandoned me the moment I was shot. Healing. It was the first time in my life someone gave me permission to simply exist. In Japan, wounded soldiers were often encouraged, no, expected to die, rather than become a burden. Some were left behind on the battlefield. Some were given a grenade. Some were ignored until infection took them quietly. And here an American doctor fought to keep me alive. I didn't know whether to be grateful or ashamed or angry or relieved. So I was all of them at once. Later that afternoon, a soldier brought us lunch, simple rice, vegetables, and a small piece of meat. It was the largest meal I had eaten in months. Kondo, the soldier across from me, stared at his plate for a long time before whispering, "My daughter would faint for a meal like this." His voice cracked. "My wife hasn't had rice in weeks." His shoulders shook. He covered his face and sobbed quietly. And I felt the same burning shame in my chest. Here we were prisoners eating better than our families, better than our comrades, better than the civilians hiding from bombs. Mercy. Mercy was crueler than bullets, because cruelty hardens you. But kindness? Kindness makes you feel, and feeling hurts. That evening, as the sun dipped and shadows stretched across the tent, Dr. Harris stopped by once more before the night shift took over. He didn't say much, just a simple, "Rest. You're safe here. Safe." That word again. I stared at him, at this man I had been told was a monster, and something inside me finally cracked all the way through. Not because of the surgery, not because of the food, not because of the medicine, but because of the way he said safe, as if he meant it, as if he believed I deserved it. And that was the moment I realized. The lies we were taught could not survive in the presence of real kindness. On the 6th morning, Dr. Harris stopped by earlier than usual. His face looked even more worn, dark circles under his eyes, hair askew, exhaustion clinging to every line of his body. War aged him faster than time could. He checked the stitches carefully, nodding with satisfaction. "You're healing well," he said. "Stronger than you look." I didn't understand, but I knew his tone. Approval, relief, encouragement. When he finished, he sat down on the crate beside my bed, a simple gesture that startled me. Japanese officers never sat beside wounded soldiers. They stood above them, towering, reminding them of failure. But Harris sat eye level with me, as if my life mattered as much as his own. He spoke slowly, hoping maybe I would catch a word or two. "You're young," he said. "Too young for this damn war." He tapped his own chest. "My boy is your age." Something in my chest tightened. His son was my age. The enemy medic had a son, a boy who could have been in school, fishing by a river, laughing with friends. A boy who could have been me if I had been born in another country. Harris continued. If he were out there, I'd pray someone would patch him up, even if he wore the wrong uniform. The wrong uniform. He said it without hatred, without weight, as if uniforms were just cloth, as if the world wasn't divided into sides, as if enemies were merely strangers in different colors. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "This war makes us forget we're all human." Those words didn't need translation. Human. The word echoed inside me like a bell. Human. Not soldier, not enemy, not prisoner. Human. No Japanese officer had ever referred to a wounded private as human with that softness. My throat tightened. I lowered my gaze and whispered, almost involuntarily, "Arigato." He didn't understand the word, but the meaning reached him. He nodded once, smiled faintly, and left. I watched his silhouette fade through the tent flap and felt my world tilt again. That afternoon, a group of American soldiers entered the tent carrying a crate. Inside were letters, stacks of them addressed to POWs. I didn't expect one. Why would I? How could my family even know I was alive? But then a soldier called my name, or at least attempted to. Sato? My heart stopped. He handed me a small envelope, worn, yellowed, creased from travel. My hands shook as I turned it over. My sister's handwriting. My little sister. The girl who used to chase fireflies with me in the fields near our home. The girl who cried the day I left for the army. Inside the envelope was a single sheet. One sentence. "We heard you might be alive. Mother waits every day." I stared at the words until my vision blurred. Mother waits every day. Every day. Waiting for a son she believed was dead. Praying. Hoping. Suffering. Meanwhile, I was lying in a clean bed, cared for by American doctors, eating better than she had eaten in months. The guilt felt like drowning. I clutched the letter to my chest and curled into myself, silently weeping into the blanket. Private Allen noticed, walked over quietly, and placed a canteen beside me. He didn't say anything. He understood, and I hated him a little for it. Not because he had done anything wrong, but because kindness from an enemy is unbearable when your family suffers under your own flag. That night, a storm rumbled across the island. Rain hammered the canvas. Thunder rolled like distant artillery. The wounded groaned in their sleep. My shoulder burned. I couldn't rest. Around midnight, the tent flap opened, and Dr. Harris walked in, his coat soaked, hair dripping. He had clearly been treating wounded Americans during the storm. maybe even saving lives under lightning-lit chaos. Yet the first thing he did after that, he came to check on me. He walked straight to my bed, placed a hand on my forehead, and felt for fever. His touch was firm, warm, steady. The touch of someone who cared. "Good," he whispered. "Temperature's down." He removed his wet coat and draped it over the foot of my bed so it would dry by morning. His own coat. A doctor giving his coat to a prisoner. I looked at him, this tired man, this enemy, this stranger whose hands had saved me, and something inside me broke completely. Not in pain, not in fear, in recognition. Recognition that the world was not what I had been taught. Recognition that Americans were not monsters. Recognition that humanity was stronger than propaganda. I let out a small, broken sound, half sob, half breath. He squeezed my shoulder gently. "Sleep," he said. "You're safe." Safe. That word again. I closed my eyes and surrendered to it. Lying in that tent, surrounded by wounded men from both sides, one truth settled over me like a blanket. Cruelty makes sense in war. Mercy does not. And yet mercy was everywhere in that tent. In the nurse's hands. In the medic's smile. In the doctor's exhaustion. In the letter from home. In the food. The blankets. The medicine. In every gesture that said, "Your life matters." And the more kindness they gave me, the more unbearable it became. Because kindness forces you to see the enemy as human, and forces you to question whether you are still human too. That was the wound that hurt the most. The one no bandage could heal. Inside was a neatly wrapped bandage roll, a small tin of ointment, and a folded paper crane. My breath stopped. A Western woman had folded a paper crane, an unmistakably Japanese symbol for a Japanese prisoner, for ME. Tears blurred my vision. I clutched the crane against my chest. She touched my arm gently. Her eyes glistened. Then she stepped back. Dr. Harris approached last. He didn't carry anything. He didn't speak immediately. He just looked at me as if memorizing my face, as if saying goodbye in 1,000 unspoken ways. Finally, he extended his hand. I stared at it, stunned. A handshake? Between an American doctor and a Japanese POW? Slowly, almost fearfully, I placed my hand in his. His grip was firm, warm, steady. "Live well," he said. 2 words, soft, simple, but heavy enough to anchor me for the rest of my life. I bowed as deeply as my body allowed. Not as a soldier, not as a prisoner, but as a son raised to honor those who showed him undeserved kindness. The inland camp was not cruel, not compared to what we feared. We received food, we performed labor, we slept on cots, we wrote letters home, but inside me, a storm raged. The shame of survival, the guilt of being fed when my family starved, the confusion of being saved by monsters who turned out to be the most humane people I had met. Some of the other soldiers mocked me when they learned I had been cared for by American doctors. They whispered, "Traitor, American pet, coward. Better if he had died." I said nothing, because I understood something they did not. Mercy is heavier than hatred, harder to carry, but the only weight worth bearing. After Japan's surrender, they sent us home. My country was ashes, cities flattened, children thin as shadows, mothers standing in ration lines that never moved, and me standing on Japanese soil with an arm saved by American hands. When my mother saw me, she wept, not because I lived, but because she feared I would be shamed. But when she touched my healed shoulder and heard my story, her tears changed. "They saved you?" she whispered. "The Americans saved you?" I nodded. She pressed her forehead to mine. "They gave you back to us." And that was the moment I understood. Survival is not shame. Kindness is not weakness. And enemies are not always enemies. I am an old man now. My joints ache in winter. My memory frays at the edges. But the memories of that tent remain sharp. The smell of antiseptic, the dim lantern light, the steady hands on my wound, a nurse feeding me broth, a medic calling me friend, a doctor saving the life of a boy raised to hate him, and the paper crane still folded, still perfect that sits on my shrine at home. Every year, on the anniversary of my surgery, I bow before it. Not to honor America, not to betray Japan, but to honor humanity. Because in war, cruelty is expected, but mercy, true mercy, is the miracle that refuses to die.